Do you like movies with zombies, parasitic aliens, spaceships, axe-wielding slashers, hard-boiled detectives, cryogenically frozen monsters, or college campus hijinks? Then you'd probably love the movie Fred Dekker has made his feature directorial debut with, because it takes all of those elements and blends them together into one 90-minute thrill ride. The movie is the 1986 cult classic Night of the Creeps, and it happens to be the best horror movie you never saw. I want to thank you guys for watching the best horror movie you never saw, and ask that if you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now. Like the video and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video goes up. And now, back to the show. Fred Dekker earned his first screen credit by coming up with the story for the 1985 film House, which was directed by genre regular Steve Miner from a screenplay by Dekker's college roommate Ethan Wiley. But beyond House, Dekker wasn't having much luck getting projects off the ground. He wrote a time travel epic called The Forever Factor that he said was rewritten to death and never made it into production. He and Miner developed an American Godzilla movie that ended up falling apart, and Dekker made an unsuccessful run at the chance to write the sequel to the horror sci-fi classic Alien, with the gig going to James Cameron instead. Having nothing to lose, he sent out his horror comedy script Night of the Creeps with himself attached as a director, and TriStar Pictures actually took the chance on letting him make this movie. Armed with a budget of $5 million, Dekker assembled a cast that's headed up by Tom Atkins as the tough but traumatized detective Ray Cameron, a role that cemented Atkins as a genre icon. When slug-like alien parasites start turning co-eds on the local college campus into mindless zombies, Cameron will come to realize that this zombie outbreak has something to do with the night back in 1959 when his ex-girlfriend was murdered by an axe-wielding mental patient. The connection is, while Cameron's ex was being murdered by the maniac, the guy she was out on a date with that night was discovering a canister that fell from the sky, like the Blob. But instead of a deadly ooze, what this canister contained was one of those alien parasites we mentioned, which leapt into his mouth and took over his body. His alien-controlled body was then captured and put in cryostasis in a secret lab at Corman University, a place named after legendary producer Roger Corman, one of the many genre filmmakers who get name-checked in the movie. 27 years later, college kids Chris, played by Jason Lively, and his best friend JC, played by Steve Marshall, have accidentally let the walking corpse and the quickly multiplying space slugs out of their icy tube while pulling a prank that was supposed to get them into a fraternity. A fraternity that they wouldn't really fit into, especially since the most prominent member is the douchey Brad, played by Mama's Family's Alan Kaiser. But Chris was hoping to impress his crush, Jill Whitlow, as sorority girl Cynthia, who happens to be dating Brad when Chris falls for her at first sight. Now, Cameron, Chris, Cynthia, and JC are going to have to figure out how to eradicate the college's alien slug infestation. Unfortunately, for many people on campus, that infestation gets way out of hand and really messes up plans for a school dance. The idea for Night of the Creeps began with Detective Cameron's catchphrase, "Thrill me," which he says several times in the movie. Dekker imagined a tough guy character answering the phone, "Thrill me," and then built the Cameron character around that moment. He had previously created the college students Chris and JC for a short film, with the Chris character being heavily based on himself, and decided to mix them into whatever story Cameron could be part of, and then he crafted the story by cobbling together every B-movie cliche he could think of. Nerds, co-eds, wisecracking detectives, corny bit characters, slimy monsters, zombies, scum from outer space, and as he described it, this movie is the equivalent of throwing a bunch of different genres into a hockey rink and having them beat each other over the head. He apparently considered calling the script Sorority Girls versus the Zombies at one point, but ended up going with Night of the Creeps. On the set of the movie, he would jokingly refer to his movie as the last B-movie, telling Fangoria that viewers would need to see any more B-movies after this one because it pays homage to all of them. He added that he was attempting to make a stupid, low-budget horror movie that would hopefully have characters that people care about when they die. At the time, he would also claim that he wrote the screenplay in just 1 week, but an interview 20 years later said it took him 2 weeks, and recently he admitted that writing the first draft took closer to 3 weeks to complete. Night of the Creeps was filmed around the University of Southern California campus and inside an abandoned Woolworth's building. And since Dekker was backed up by a solid cast and a decent budget, had Steve Miner shooting second unit for him, and could rely on an FX crew led by David B. Miller, who had previously worked on The Terminator, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, and Michael Jackson's Thriller video, among other things, they made it through principal photography without running into any major issues. The problems didn't arise until post-production, and once Dekker and editor Michael N. New started cutting footage together, it was discovered that the movie had a serious pacing issue, which the director says the studio railroaded him on. Disagreements over the pacing got so serious that an executive ended up shutting Dekker out of the editing room and doing their own pass on the film with New. Dekker then watched the executive's cut and approved anything about the film he didn't hate. The studio gave Dekker a lot of grief about the pacing at the time, but when he recorded the audio commentary for a DVD and Blu-ray release of Night of the Creeps 20 years later, he voiced his own displeasure with the pacing of certain scenes and sequences that were still in the final cut. He learned his lesson about making sure moments are paced right from this experience, and anytime he directed anything from this point on, he would have a stopwatch with him on set and would ask the actors to speed things up if a scene was taking too long to play out. The film ran into more trouble when it was subjected to a test screening, which Dekker has described as being disastrous. Reactions to that screening convinced TriStar that 4 or 5 days of reshoots were necessary to enhance the climatic action sequences. Dekker gave Cameron more cool things to do in his battle against the space slug zombies, and at the suggestion of studio executive, he also added a scene in which Chris and Cynthia, already armed with a shotgun and flamethrower for their fight with the zombies, seek shelter in a tool shed and use some other implements against the undead, most notably a lawnmower, a precursor to the lawnmower sequence in Peter Jackson's zombie movie, Dead Alive. One thing that couldn't be salvaged was Dekker's preferred ending for the film, a scene that features a spaceship hovering over a graveyard. The special effects weren't finished when the movie was shown to the test screening audience, so viewers were confused by it, and TriStar ordered that it be replaced by a jump scare ending featuring a zombie dog puppet that Dekker wasn't happy with. That dog ending was included in the theatrical cut, which also ended up being the cut of the film that was put on VHS and Laserdisc. The TV cut of the movie had the spaceship ending, though with the effects finished, of course, and when Night of the Creeps came to DVD and Blu-ray, Dekker made sure the movie had the TV cut ending, the ending he wanted, all along. The effort to get the movie into the best condition possible didn't pay off in 1986. TriStar had so little faith in Night of the Creeps, they gave it a limited regional release. It only played in 70 theaters in areas scattered across the United States, and some of the areas didn't even have its proper title. In Cincinnati, for example, Night of the Creeps was released as Homecoming Night. Because of this botched release strategy, the movie didn't really find its audience until it was on home video and started playing on cable. But once genre fans had the chance to see it, it quickly gained a cult following and remains a beloved cult movie to this day. The box office failure of Night of the Creeps didn't bother Dekker much because by the time it was released, he was already working on his second feature, The Monster Squad, another movie we've covered in the Best Horror Movie You Never Saw series. The director hated Night of the Creeps for years anyway because when he watched it, all he could see was its flaws. It took a long time for him to see the charm that the film used to win its fans with. Night of the Creeps and The Monster Squad are both considered classics today and have legions of fans, but Dekker says Creeps is the one that reflects his own personal aesthetic more, since executive producer Peter Hyams had a major influence on how a lot of The Monster Squad was shot. Dekker was calling his own shots on Night of the Creeps, he just wasn't fully responsible for the final cut or the theatrical ending. You can tell from the opening moments that Night of the Creeps is going to be an awesome movie. It begins on a spaceship with a quick action scene featuring a trio of really funny-looking aliens. Dekker didn't intend these aliens to get a laugh, but it's hard not to chuckle at the sight of them, and director quickly realized that this was a good thing because when these creatures are the first things you see in the movie, it gives the audience permission to go along with the humor of the film and continue laughing throughout the rest of the running time. One of the aliens is under the control of the slugs, and the other two are trying to stop it from launching the canister that contains one of the parasites into space. Despite firing their laser guns at their zombified pal, the aliens aren't able to keep the canister on their ship, and then the film jumps to a great black and white sequence set in 1959 with both the canister and an escaped mental patient ruining a couple's romantic night out. It will take a while for Night of the Creeps to reach this level of excitement again once the story moves ahead to 1986, so it's understandable when you hear that Dekker still has issues with the pacing, but the film has an entertaining tone and likable characters that carry you through to the next sequences of action and horror. Dekker was able to achieve his goal of making sure the audience would care about Chris, JC, and Cynthia, and Tom Atkins really steals the show with his performance as the wisecracking Detective Cameron, who has a dark secret and becomes unhinged and suicidal when the infestation of space slugs causes that secret to resurface. Literally. But he doesn't allow his dark mood to stop him from continuing to drop amusing lines or from putting his all into wiping out zombies. The zombie dog puppet may be disappointing to the director, and the aliens were unexpectedly funny, but overall, David B. Miller and his crew did an incredible job with the film's special effects, and they're still nice to see all these years later. Night of the Creeps also wins points due to the fact that the JC character is unable to walk without using crutches, but Dekker didn't make a huge deal about this in the story. It is addressed, but it's taken as a fact about the character. When asked why he had JC use crutches, Dekker replied, "There's no reason except that we just don't see it. You can make a movie with a character who's handicapped without the story being about the fact that he's handicapped." The opening scenes are a highlight, but there's more fun to come as Night of the Creeps goes along. There's a suspenseful scene where JC has a run-in with the space slugs in a restroom, and one of the best moments comes when Cameron is faced with the axe-wielding, rotten corpse of the homicidal mental patient he executed 27 years before, now under the control of the alien parasites. Then we get the big action sequence at the end with a horde of zombies attacking the sorority house while Cameron, Chris, and Cynthia gun them down and blast them with a flamethrower. The movie's low budget does show through in how simple the action is. Viewers probably expect the action to take up more time and be more elaborate in a modern movie. You can see why the reshoots and the addition of the tool shed scene were absolutely necessary, because the climax would feel underwhelming without them, but thankfully, the studio realized this aspect of the film needed to be enhanced before they released it. What's in the finished film works quite well and is a lot of fun to watch. Dekker's described Night of the Creeps as a strange little movie, saying that that's part of its charm. He isn't sure what a modern viewer would make of it if they were just seeing it for the first time now, but he does feel that the movie holds up. He told the Dark Lord Bunnykins website that it has a resonance because there are very likable characters and it's really kind of a crazy story, and it's tough to go wrong with those two things. Horror fans who have a love for 1980s genre movies, old school practical effects, and B-movie cliches are really likely to have a blast with Night of the Creeps, whether they watched it for the first time in 1986 or 2022. And if you really want to be assured that this is a quality horror comedy, you don't have to take our word for it. Trust genre icon Tom Atkins, who ranks Night of the Creeps as his personal favorite of all the movies he's made. And coming from an actor who's been in such films as The Fog, Escape from New York, Creepshow, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, Lethal Weapon, and Maniac Cop, among many others, it makes it clear that Night of the Creeps is something special.